Greetings, good afternoon to the viewers. My name is Dr. Charles Sinkala, President of Africa 55 States and Organization for African Political Parties. This evening, I host the Russian ambassador to South Africa to discuss a few things regarding the conflicts within the Ukrainian boundaries and the Russian boundaries. He will be joining me soon as we discuss the important aspects and matters regarding the conflicts within the region. There's many matters that we have to discuss in terms of how the conflicts are affecting the African continent in terms of understanding. And as well as the perspective on how the world views the United States of America and many others who are concerned in the mediation or negotiating within the conflicts. And I think part of it boils down to the United Nations, especially the Security Council, who presides over many aspects in terms of peace and conflicts within the region. This is very significant, to address issues such as those issues which has been misinterpreted, and we are fully aware that the media has been in the forefront of trying to portray a different picture from what reality actually tells us as people in the world. And I think this is actually the beginning of the time that we start discussing these issues. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Charles Sinkala, President of Africa 55 States. We are waiting to let in the ambassador of Russia in South Africa. Hi, greetings. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Ambassador.
Так, а где здесь?
Good evening, Your Excellency. You are muted, Your Excellency. If they can allow you to unmute.
Good evening. Do you hear me?
Good evening. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
Good evening to you, Your Excellency.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time to meet me this afternoon. I believe you are quite busy in your schedule.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe you had load shedding there, but we can carry on with our meeting just to have a perspective from you. My name is Dr. Charles Sinkala. I'll be your host. I'm the president of Africa 55 States. I represent opposition political parties and those political parties in government as well on the continental level. We've been approached to share this with you from your office, Your Excellency, due to a lot of misinformation and lack of clarity which we are having in the media space. Your Excellency, briefly, if you can just, share with me, in terms of what is happening between the diplomatic conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, and as well as how did this issue come to light, and where are we going at? That is what we are actually looking at, and as well as would like to look at the relationship you have from your counterpart, the ambassador to South Africa from, and as well as would like to find out in terms of the ongoing negotiations between the two peoples of Republic of Russia and the Republic of Ukraine, from what President Putin is also discussing, if he's discussing with President Zelensky, and how can they resolve these issues in terms of diplomatic core. So that's just the background of what we're gonna talk about. But I would like to begin to ask you, Your Excellency, Ambassador, what really happened, to the military escalation in Ukraine? We believe that there was an escalation from NATO, United States of America, and Europe before Russia moved in their territory of Ukraine. Please, if you can highlight us for us onto that point.
Well, I'm not sure I really understand the question. What happened to escalation? It escalated, or what?
Yes, Your Excellency.
Yes, I can tell you that. Yes.
I meant that when everything was okay, leading to what they call the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and the rumors or whatever stories the United States of America was telling to the world that Russia wants to invade Ukraine. Is it that perspective, or what happened to the escalation of the military, and when Russia also moved into Ukraine?
Well, it's I cannot start at the point when the Russian military moved into Ukraine because preparations were ongoing for many months by that time. And you know that since 2014, there was a latent war in eastern Ukraine where two regions, altogether this area is called Donbass. It is an industrial, very old industrial region, and since the times of the Russian Empire, and that these two regions, given the fact that in February 2014 in Kiev, the opposition took power through an unconstitutional coup, and ultranationalists and Nazis got very close to power and were basically in control. Some regions disagreed with this perspective. They didn't want this perspective for them, like Crimea, for example, like the region of Odessa, and some others. And in the eastern Ukraine, it escalated into a violent protest. The protests became violent, and these two regions had to mobilize and fight for themselves for the possibility to speak Russian language and to remain Russian, as this region is predominantly Russian. And looking at that example and looking to the situation in Odessa region, where protests also became violent and people suffered, and that was this incident. Terrible thing happened when peaceful protesters were driven into a building, which is the so-called trade union building, and the building was torched, and 42 people were burnt alive inside, and many others trying to escape jumped off the windows, and the crowd rushed to finish them. So Crimeans acted quickly and decisively, and they proclaimed their independence from Ukraine and had a referendum about whether to join Russia or no, and the absolute majority voted in favor of rejoining Russia. But in the east of Ukraine, the violence escalated, and it basically became a civil war. It has been ongoing, as I said, since then. Bombings and shelling took place almost on a daily basis, as Ukrainian side from time to time bombed and shelled. And I know you mentioned my colleague Lyubov Abravitova here. She speaks publicly quite regularly, and she doesn't forget to mention that up to 15,000 of Ukrainians died in this conflict. What she forgets to mention, intentionally of course, is that most of these victims are on the side of these two people's republics, Donetsk and Lugansk, the two big cities around which the two regions are formed, which remained unrecognized by the international community until very recently. And in February, Russian Federation recognized them as independent states. So the conflict was ongoing. People were dying. Media, mainstream media, mostly, as we know, expressing the interests of transnational corporations, controlled by mostly Anglo-Saxon media. They almost did not report about it. And for many people, this war remained unknown. And this is what we have to face here, in particular, had to face in South Africa. And that to many people, this remained and remains unknown. People are ignorant about that. The thousands of Russian citizens, in particular, as many of these from the Donbas population asked for Russian citizenship and received it, were killed. And so the course of events, what was happening there, allows to talk about genocide of the Russian population. So this had to stop. This had to stop. But on the contrary, the Ukrainians were preparing to resolve this issue by force. And since end of summer, perhaps beginning of fall last year, they have begun a military build-up in the eastern side of their country, along the dividing line with these two unrecognized republics. And they have amassed like 2/3 of their army there, 160 to 170 men. And again, mainstream media didn't speak about that. They haven't reported that. What they have reported, though, was that when Russia started to concentrate some of our military on our border with these two republics, that really gave place to anti-Russian hysteria. Like Russia is going to attack, Russia is this, Russia does that. But the Ukrainian intention to resolve this issue by military force, by attacking these two regions of its own, was obvious. And they never, Ukrainians themselves never really hid it. So it was discussed openly in Russia, in Ukraine, and in Russia on many talk shows and in many occasions, all kinds of different experts, commentators, just discuss when and how this attempt to quell, to subdue the two republics would begin.
So,
And,
Ambassador, if I
yes.
may disturb you there, so you've talked about the history, not only in understanding the fact that this was never started, just like what the world said like 30 days ago. These has been some conflicts within Ukraine for quite a long time. Part of them hasn't been published, but one who understand and say, but why is Russia being mentioned? Instead of mentioning Poland, instead of mentioning China or any other countries, what is the story of Russia being in the central of the news and them reporting about that Russia is actually invading the soil of Ukraine? Meanwhile, there has been some internal conflict within the Russian communities, looking at the two actually states which has become now independent and recognized by the international community due to the infighting among others. Why Russia?
Well, this is just part of the story. This undeclared or maybe even declared war against these two republics, mostly populated with Russians, ethnic Russians, as I said, is only immediate reason for military operation in Ukraine. Others being of a different nature, rather strategic security concerns rather than anything else. And the biggest story is that, as we know, I think that I can say we all know now that the fall of the Iron Curtain between Western and Eastern Europe, the capitalist Europe and socialist Europe, was how would I say, обусловлено, Саша? Well, нет, условия, как было условие. Was conditioned by the proliferation of NATO to the east. And these promises have been made to Soviet and then to the Russian leadership at that time. But they were not put on paper, really. There was no written document, written agreement that would testify to that, except for the minutes of many meetings, papers exchanged internally between NATO countries, and then papers that were written in the USSR, from which it is absolutely clear that these promises have been made. Since then, NATO expanded in 5 waves since 1991, 1990. And it was getting closer and closer to the Russian borders. And given its aggressive nature, which we could see on such examples like bombing of Yugoslavia, bombing of Libya, and so on, we thought that we have to be concerned with this advancement. And then not only new countries became new NATO members, but also military infrastructure, NATO military infrastructure was moved closer and closer to our borders. And in particular, strategic anti-missile defense systems appeared in the territories of Poland and Romania a few years ago. Then United States began the process of dismantling of the system of arms control and arms reduction. Well, there is no more issue of arms reduction, and they have withdrawn consequently from several major treaties. So basically, the last one was the Open Skies Treaty, and basically this system is non-existent now. That also spoke a lot to the military experts about the intentions of the leading NATO country, United States. And then, of course, the evolution in Ukraine was also rather troublesome, as NATO instructors started training Ukrainian troops. They said it recently themselves, the NATO officials, that they have been training 4 battalions per year. They have been training them and also equipping and arming them. And that became a considerable military force. Not, of course, the strongest army in Europe, as Ukrainians used to brag, but that's just bragging. But it was a considerable, and it is still a considerable military force. So there were different kinds of military drills held in the territory of Ukraine, and there were plans to have more and to build some naval bases and permanent NATO bases in Ukraine without even admitting it formally as a NATO member. So all these red lines we indicated to our former partners in the West, and we told Ukrainians that they did not have to become NATO member, and really, in order to provide for their security, look at Finland and Sweden. But that was to no avail. And then there were other elements threatening Russia's security. We all know now that there were biological laboratories conducting some research in the interest of Pentagon, financed by Pentagon, controlled by Pentagon, with heavy foreign participation in Ukraine. We thought that there was a certain number of them. We knew that, but it happened to be many more. Now we have counted 26 of them, with very disturbing researches that they were conducting. and so
So,
biological
Ambassador,
weapons were being elaborated.
on these facilities financed by Pentagon, have you published any proof or evidence that we can show to the world that look, the escalation really started from the NATO? You know, even though Ukraine was not part of NATO, even though Russia was not part of Ukraine, NATO rather. Is there any weapons of bio weapons manufactured in laboratories in Ukraine that you can confirm?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, there was a certain number of them already there in the pre-February 24th time, and two more were to become operational in March, and that was the announcement on the website of U.S. Embassy in Kiev. But about the kind of research that was being executed there, you can go to the website of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, and they have the full set there. Besides, on the, I think, 18th of March, Russia has asked for a special UN Security Council meeting and dedicated to this subject matter. And we have presented ample evidence there about these laboratories. And of course, again, mainstream media didn't speak about it. They didn't comment. They never retold Russian position and what was presented by the Russian side at that meeting. And they never quoted our representatives there and so on. And our Western former partners basically declined to discuss this issue, but spoke about something else, about this situation in Ukraine and so on. And we think that in general, this issue is grossly underestimated by the world opinion. It is a very serious matter. We know that there are many other biological laboratories which are controlled by Americans like that in many different countries, maybe up to 400 of them in total in the world. And what they're doing is basically they are researching possibilities to produce ethnically selective biological weapons. So
Talking about that external factors, I think, you know, a lot of people have been questioning as well United States of America involvement in many countries. You know, we can talk about the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Syria, the invasion of Libya, the invasion of Afghanistan, and many other nations where America has partnered or tried to either pretend to promote the democracy there, but we've had very devastating results. You know, what do you think Russian point at this point? You know, having had a relationship with the United States of America, and are also noted that leading to the escalation of military within that region. When President Joe Biden was elected, and after attending the United Nations Security Council, he actually visited President Putin. What was the discussions from that? And I think the status of the United States of America in the center of this conflict.
Yes, we will be getting there. But let me remind you that not everything depends upon the discussion. As in particular, the last meeting, which was supposed to take place between US and Russian presidents, didn't happen. It didn't take place because American president refused to speak, refused to talk to our president. So that's a deplorable situation. But again, let me finish, please, with the reasons for the special military operation in Ukraine. As I mentioned several of them already. The latest one was biological weapons that were worked on in many 26 actually, to be precise, laboratories in the territory of Ukraine, but also Ukrainian officials declared recently, in the last year or so, their intention to reacquire. Он здесь, нет? Are you there? Любопытно. Everyone can see and hear you. Окей. Ну, я все-таки, наверное, не буду ничего говорить, пока я не получу подтверждение. You are in the show. Вот здесь вот есть вот это вот. You are in the show, everyone can see and hear you.